Okay, so that's working. Should be recording. Okay, so long story short, notice that the vessels and capillary dynamics exam YouTube video is severely out of date. And so, okay, I'm just redoing it. So, okay, let's go. So under D2L, or whenever, if we switch up with something else, under laboratory is your sections for each of the lab exams. So under the vessels and capillary dynamics ones, you have this PowerPoint that has your information for the exam. So unlike with the AP1 exams, these are a little bit more involved, especially respiratory and digestive lab exam. It's the next one. It is, that one's more covering stuff that, same things that you covered in class and learned about. This one will go through some pathways, so there's a little bit of memorization to go with it, but still fairly easy, less memorization based than the ones from AP1. So let's go through this PowerPoint. Yep. Okay. So there's the first page. So your first question is going to go through the pattern of what our blood vessels are named as they go through the systemic pathway. So leaving the heart, going through our tissues, and then returning to the heart. So that pathway is this right here: arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. So you'll have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a word bank to put stuff in. So kind of a silly way of thinking about this. The alphabetical order for these words just happens to follow through. So arteries, arterioles, capillaries, until you get here where the venules and the veins are switched in alphabetical order. So technically veins would come before venules in alphabetical order, but for this pathway, venules go before veins. So there's a little pathway for the first question. Okay, looking at the next one. Oh, by the way, these reference pictures are also going to be on the exam in black and white, of course. So some people, they kind of want something to look at, so they'll be on the last page. So these pictures, knowing, okay, looking where you are, sometimes that helps people with visualizing stuff. So for the pathways, this might help you. Some people, they just visualize the pathway on their own body. So first pathway, you will have a chart just like the practice chart that is under your vessels exam stuff. So it'll look exactly the same, except for you'll also have the word bank with the letters. So you don't have to spell anything, just put the A, B, C, D, or E. So this first pathway, you don't have to know what this type of injection is, but you are going to follow this pathway. All the things that are in all caps and in color will be already on your pathway. And so you're just filling in the gaps. So some of this you actually can do without even like memorizing the pathway. So for example, what's the blood vessel that returns blood to the heart? And in this case, because you're going from the arm, you're going from on top of the heart. So that's superior vena cava, simple there. And then leaving the heart. So we have our ascending aorta, aortic arch, descending aorta. Once you pass through the diaphragm, it becomes the abdominal aorta. So real simple, easy to fill that in. Blood vessels going in and out the kidneys. So renal artery, renal vein, easy. And then returning to the heart from below the heart, we have the inferior vena cava. So most of this is fairly simple on, at least this first pathway, on, okay, I just know these blood vessels where they're just these generic ones. So this pathway is actually the easier of the two. Even the other one is fairly easy as well too. So going up to these 4 that you kind of need to at least do some memorization on. So way some people have it is they'll do it's worked for some people, the BASB as a way to remember the order of those 4, because the rest of this is pretty good. And you'll also use BASB on the second pathway. So making sure, of course, obviously, which B goes where. thinking of where you are. So this brachiocephalic vein, so that is your kind of branch off portion where you have blood coming in from the arm region, blood coming into the head region. So you're like near the shoulder. So this is how you put that there. So right there before you go right back into the heart. So that's one way to remember that. Next one. So the next few slides, it just kind of points out where stuff is so you can follow the pathway as you're going through each section. So that's what these are, just pointing out where they are. You won't label these pictures. You'll just fill out that chart on the test. So just know the pathways. This is just a visualization. Okay, second pathway. So this is a fairly easy one to go through as in visualizing on your physical body, because you're going to the arm and then coming back. So leaving our left ventricle. So on this pathway, these actually mirror each other for a significant section of it. So we're going to leave the left ventricle, go down to the middle finger, and then return to the heart. So some of these is just fill in the blank of duh, I already know these, and then kind of filling in those few spaces where you need to know stuff. So for example, returning to the heart from above the heart. So from your arm, that's above the heart where that blood's going to come in. So that's superior vena cava. Okay, done. Easy on that one. Leaving the left ventricle, ascending aorta, and then aortic arch. Pretty simple. Then you have to switch up with, okay, where are we going? So at this moment, we have our split off between our head and going to our arm region. So there's our brachiocephalic portion. So brachii for arm, cephalic for head. So once we pass through there, we're going to go underneath the clavicle, going to our armpit region. So axillary means armpit. And then to our brachii arm region, radial forearm region, palmar arch, which is palm of the hand. And then like our fingers, our digits is the digital one. So pretty easy, like knowing where are you on your arm as you're going through your pathway as you are getting blood to that area. So even though you're not like making turns or whatnot, it switches names as you go through the pathway. So that's why it's important to know this, because you do have certain areas where it's like, okay, this blood vessel has a name, and most of them are usually because of either where they're going to, where they're coming from, or the area where they're in. Okay, looking at our mirror image. So we're just going to turn back to the heart, going right back up the arm. So we leave the finger, we're in the palm of the hand, we're on the radius side, so there's your forearm, brachii arm region, axillary armpit region. So one silly way of remembering axillary is armpit is thinking of Axe body spray. So you would spray that into the arm, kind of, makes it smell better. So that's kind of silly way of remembering that one. Going underneath the subclavicle, and then here's our brachii arm, cephalic head region branch off before dumping into our superior vena cava. So these two are mirror images of each other. So palmar arch, so remembering vein versus artery, so that you don't accidentally be like, oh yeah, I put radial here, and it's like, nope, this should be radial artery, not radial vein. So pay attention. So we go from the palm of the hand, radial, brachial, axillary. So all of these are mirror images of each other. So just like we had with our last pathway, that BASB, it's here again. That brachiocephalic, again, that last one right before you dump into that superior vena cava. You just have a different B for this one. And again, because these are mirror images, the BASB is backwards on this side, but still your brachiocephalic is very close to where the heart is. And then there's more pictures with your pathways, identifying where they are, just giving a visual aid for some people. Okay, next question is your branches of the abdominal aorta. So still you'll have like a chart, and in that chart, lumbar arteries will be already in the chart. So basically you're covering the 4 that are in the above the lower back region, the 4 that are below it. So I do have silly ways of remembering that. So starting from the top and going towards the bottom. So the first set of 4, we have our celiac trunk. So just like the people who have celiac disease who can't actually eat gluten because they don't have the enzyme. So that's like a stomach issue, also can affect their small intestines, but upper abdomen for that situation. Then we have our second position. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, second set, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The second position for both of these is a mesenteric artery. So just thinking of your directional terms, superior is above inferior. So there's going to be a mesenteric artery in that second position for both sets of 4. It's just that superior is going to be above and inferior is the below one. Next to. So we have our renal arteries and suprarenal. So looking at directional terms, supra as it is superior to the renal artery. So it's above the renal artery. So that's how you pair both of those together. Now moving to our lower, below the lower back region. So we got the gonads. These are sex organs. There's our mesenteric in the second position again, except for this time it's the inferior one. Then we have our medial sacral artery. So that it's going to our sacrum, that kind of triangular shaped bone at the end of your vertebral column. And then lastly, the common iliac arteries are going to split to your leg. So even further inferior or south on the body for its orientation. So those are your branches of the abdominal aorta. So still putting them into a chart based off of their location. Okay, so we do have some labeling on the test. So this first one is called the Cerebral Arterial Circle, or also called the Circle of Willis. So you'll have a question that asks you what's the importance of this structure. And so your answer is going to be blood distribution in the brain. So let's look at the 7 blood vessels that you will identify. So this first one is the internal carotid artery. So that's here. And for our brain, just looking at directional terms, here's that front side of the brain, so anterior side. So we're looking from below the brain. And here is the back side. So there's your cerebellum, here's your brain stem stuff. So we're on that posterior side. Another thing for this structure, these little bridges for our structure, these are your communicating ones. So the bridge up here is going to be your anterior communicating artery. And then the bridge back here is your posterior communicating artery. Here's your anterior cerebral artery, and then number 5, your posterior cerebral artery. Then your last 2, your basilar artery, so here at the base of the brain. And then number 7, the vertebral artery, as you are going down towards, here's our, eventually moving into our spinal cord, moving into where the vertebrae are. So that's one easy way to remember that one. So that's your first labeling question. Second labeling question. So only 4 in this one, but a little bit more on the importance. So 3 things that are important about your hepatic portal system. So hepatic referring to liver. So all of the blood for your abdominal region drains into your liver. So all of it's going to go to the liver before it goes back to the heart. So there's importance number 1. 2, sends nutrients to the liver first. So our liver stores some of those nutrients that we got from the food we ate. So from the stomach, from the small intestines that are not pictured here, those nutrients are all going to go to the liver. That way the liver can store them first. And then lastly, allows the liver to detox the blood. So depending on what you've eaten or even medications, sometimes the liver actually changes those molecules. Like, for example, people who are alcoholics, and so they drink heavy, and all of the toxicity from the alcohol that's absorbed in the stomach and then eventually also in the small intestines, that's got to go to the liver. The liver has to detox it. So that's why often these people have problems with their liver, because their livers had to do so much work because of the alcohol. And this is also the spot where sometimes when you take medications, eventually over time, they might get converted to other molecules. And that's why some medications you have to take multiple times a day, because either your liver detoxes them, changes the molecule, or your kidney gets rid of it. There are some medications that they rely on the liver detoxing whatever is the detoxing the molecule from whatever, whatever got absorbed in the bloodstream. And so it actually activates the medicine. Anyway, so looking at our labeling. So the first one is the splenic vein. So liver and spleen, the labeling that's on this picture will also be on the labeling for the test. So on that same picture. So this splenic one is going towards the spleen. That one's easier. We have our inferior and superior mesenteric vein. So in your pathway of your food moving, or eventually waste moving through your intestines, you have your small intestines first, then you start off with our ascending colon and then switching over to the transverse colon. So in this section where we have this 3 labeled here, this is the superior mesenteric. On this side, as we're going through descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, anus. So this is the second area where this is in the intestines. So this is the inferior mesenteric vein. So number 2 is inferior. Number 3 is the superior one. This is just going in clockwise order. So that just happened that way. Oh, well. And the last one, the hepatic portal vein. So going to our liver. So same vocabulary term referring to liver. Okay, so this last part is the capillary dynamics portion. I do have a whole YouTube video going over like the basics for this. So for this video, I'm going to just do it just for a little bit. So very brief overview. If you want more detail, there's other videos that do that. So on the last question for the exam, you need to know what these little initials stand for. Make sure you draw your arrows. Again, colloid osmotic pressure of the blood is the only one that's going to be drawing fluid into your capillaries. Everybody else is moving fluid out. Pay attention to where your numbers are and knowing what these are as well. I will switch, like maybe this one and this one, or this one and this one, same thing, or they'll still be in either the blood of the capillaries or on the tissue space, but I might put COPI here and then HPI here, just kind of as a way of, are you paying attention to what the numbers are, instead of just like, okay, I plug this number here, plug this number, and then just do math, instead of like, did you understand what you should be comparing? Because you'll compare your hydrostatic pressures to each other and compare your colloid osmotic pressures to each other. Another thing to note is the very last question I asked you, which one's the arterial end, which one's the venous end, and why. So for most of these numbers, they're going to stay pretty stable, except for blood pressure. Blood pressure is going to be higher on the arterial end, lower on our venous end. So that's how you know the difference between them. Okay, so again, I have a full video that has all of your more detailed and as well as practice for the capillary dynamics portion. We'll also do a practice run in the classroom, but you'll do your arterial side numbers here. So hydrostatic pressures against each other, osmotic pressures against each other, and then same thing for the venous end, remembering if they're going in the same direction, you add them. Remembering our hydrostatic pressure of your interstitial or tissue fluid, even though it's a negative number, the negative is showing you that it's also drawing fluid out of the capillary. So it's working like a vacuum. So ignore the negative number and just add whatever number to blood pressure, because it's helping to move fluid out of the capillaries. Okay, so add when they're going in the same direction, subtract when they're going in opposite direction. So you do your arterial end, then your venous end, and then you're going to compare both arterial end numbers. So this is where you want to keep up with, your in versus out. So you can making sure, okay, should I be adding or subtracting these numbers? So arterial end numbers, comparing them to each other to get your net filtration pressure. And then your venous end numbers, comparing them to each other to get your net reabsorption pressure. So other than that, you are good. If you have questions, let me know. but that is what's it for the vessels exam. See you later. Okay, stop.